If you've ever sold a house with me, you've probably heard me say during the due diligence period where the buyer has their list of requests of repairs, you'll hear me say, let's not do the repairs, let's give her credit. Many of you maybe have questioned that, and here's why. My name is Carley Rae, and this is the day in the life of a full-time realtor. As a seller, there's a lot of liability when selling a house. First and foremost, there's what's called an SRPD, a seller's real property disclosure form, in which the seller is required to list out the known facts, even if they've been repaired, of the house, to then give the buyer to decide if the buyer wants to move forward on the property. So if you had a leak at one point and got fixed, you got to write it down. If you've changed out appliances, you need to write it down. If you've ever had mold, anything that has been, or for an addition has been added, things like that, they have to be added to the property so the buyer is aware of it. Now, if the seller was to lie about something on the seller's real property disclosure form, the seller could be liable for 3 times the damages to the buyer. Now, when it comes from a request for repairs, if a seller doesn't know that there's a broken roof tile, they didn't know there was a leak under a faucet, if there's things just in your house you just don't know about, they're not lying. But when it comes up on a request for repairs, now they know of these known facts, which means they could be held liable if they don't do something about it, unless it was, hey, the house is being sold as is. So, as a seller, I definitely encourage my clients to give a credit versus repairs, because if you hire someone or you do the repairs yourself, you could be held liable if the work was not done correctly or not done to code. However, if you give a credit, then you're off the hook. A great example is I had a client that I had sold this house to, then he was going to sell it by something else, and there was something wrong with the air conditioner. And he had done a lot of repairs on this house and living in and was just kind of done. And he's like, look, I agree with you. Let's just give a credit. They can get the air conditioner fixed after we close. Perfect. So we do that. We get a call 2 weeks after closing, and guess what? The entire air conditioning blew, water in the duct vents, like the whole thing is bad. And they wanted to sue my seller for selling a house with a bad AC. And it came back to, I was at the home inspection, so I know what the inspector said, that the AC was working at that time, but there was weak airflow. I was at the walkthrough. During the walkthrough, they signed off on the fact that the house was in the condition that they felt comfortable in. They had received a credit towards this. Now, the credit wasn't anything crazy, but it was a credit that both the seller and the buyer agreed to, and the transaction closed. My client was no longer liable, even though that AC was not working. So food for thought, if you're selling a house, give the credit, don't do the repairs. If you can do that. This is Carley Rae in Las Vegas, Nevada, with the day in the life of a full-time realtor.